I just want to briefly outline the ways in which the provision of the current anti-terror law, that's the UAPA, enables the central government, or the US would be called as federal government, to ban organizations as unlawful associations and to designate organizations as terrorist organizations. In doing so, I will outline how this broad and unchecked power is used by the central government, has impacted both on the right to freedom of association and the right to freedom of speech and expression. And through my fieldwork and some of the terrorism cases, I will show that how the police and prosecution attempt to use speech acts to bring charges of membership of terrorist organizations. I have 1 minute less than I thought I had, so you have my written comments, so I'll just skip over this bit. But briefly to say that the current anti-terrorism law allows, criminalizes membership of a terrorist organization or a banned unlawful association. It has two ways to ban associations. One way is under Section 3 of the Act, under which the central government can declare an association as unlawful. And membership of an unlawful association carries a punishment of up to 2 years imprisonment. This is a slightly more judicially checked power, in the sense that once the government bans an association, it must make a reference to an independent tribunal, which can cancel or approve the government notification. The second way is completely unchecked, and this is through the ability of the central government to designate an organization as a terrorist organization under Section 35 of the UAPA. The procedure here are far less stringent, even though the consequences are far higher. The government must only list the name of the organization in the schedule to the statute. There is a provision for a review committee to review these designations, but to my knowledge, this has never been set up. The punishment for being a member of a terrorist organization is imprisonment of up to 10 years. During my fieldwork in Delhi's trial courts, I found that most terrorism trials taking place were for crimes of speech and for membership of a banned organization. Take, for example, the case of someone who I came to know called Yasin Patel Falahi. Falahi was the office bearer of the Students' Islamic Movement of India, that's SIMI, before it was both declared an unlawful association and a terrorist organization in 2001. Soon thereafter, the police arrested Falahi and charged him with sedition and membership of a terrorist organization and other hate speech related charges. The Delhi Police's Special Anti-Terror Corps, known as the Special Cell, alleged that Falahi had put up a poster in a predominantly Muslim area of South Delhi at a busy intersection in broad daylight. Despite doing this, the police could produce no independent or public witnesses. The poster, and this is key, as described in the prosecution's charge sheet, had a quote-unquote anti-national slogan to, quote, destroy nationalism, establish khilafat, that's ruled by Islamic principles, in big lettering, with a picture of a closed fist crushing the flags of Russia, the USA, and India. After a trial that lasted several years and comprised of only police witnesses, Falahi was convicted of sedition and of membership of a terrorist organization. In a Shoddali region's judgment, the trial court reasoned that this act of putting up a poster demonstrated that Falahi continued to be a member of a terrorist organization and sentenced him to 5 years imprisonment. Other members of SIMI have been charged for membership of a terrorist organization for different acts. These acts include the protesting of a burning of Quran, for possessing Islamic literature, some of which may have been published by SIMI prior to its banning, for loudly questioning the Indian sovereignty over Kashmir, to possessing or distributing audio recordings of Osama bin Laden. I want to emphasize that these are charges brought by the police, and in the vast majority of cases, we are not even sure if these speech acts were actually made, or if they were made, if they would lead to convictions for membership, as there have been very few and almost no judgments. Further, SIMI members have been accused of committing acts of violence, but most cases brought against purported SIMI members pertain to speech and membership. This is not a pattern that pertains to SIMI alone. In another case that I followed during my fieldwork, 2 trade union activists were arrested and charged with being members of a banned Communist Party. According to the 2 people who I met in the Delhi courts, they were active in organizing workers in Delhi's unorganized sector. The special cell accused them of being members of the Communist Party of India, Maoist. The police alleged that they had made speeches amongst workers of Delhi to instigate them to join the Maoist cause. The only evidence submitted by the prosecution in support of this charge is a literature that was ostensibly seized from their homes, copies of Marxist literature, and publication and pamphlets produced by communist organizations, not all of which were banned. In any event, it is not a crime to read or to possess literature that is produced by banned organizations. But the police have regularly used the mere possession of such literature as evidence of a membership of a banned organization. The fact that most of the overwhelming majority of terrorism trials end in acquittal, and the conviction rate for a previous anti-terror statute was something like 0.04%. Yet this is a little comfort. Apart from the fact that charges under anti-terror legislations are not aimed at obtaining a conviction, but as Indra Jai Singh said, they're used to detain people for as long as possible. The mere charges filed for speech and membership cases serves to further justify the ban on organizations. In 2001, just after SIMI was banned for the first time, police around the country filed charges based on membership against SIMI members. These charges, and note they're not convictions since there were none, were used to argue for a subsequent ban on SIMI. According to the central government, the charges against accused individuals showed the continued existence of SIMI. Thus, charges against people for membership of SIMI justified a further ban on SIMI, which in turn justified and brought further membership charges. There's a self-fulfilling circularity between banning of organizations and bringing terrorism charges. Many of the more recent arrests under the UAPA across India, from the Bhima Koregaon arrest in 2018 that Indra Jai Singh mentioned, to the protests against the recent Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019, to arrests of journalists such as Siddique Kappan, who wanted to report on gang rape in Uttar Pradesh, have involved police accusing people of being members of terrorist organizations or being part of terrorist conspiracies solely based on speeches that they are purported to have made. For example, in the Bhima Koregaon event, the police complaint alleges that a theatre troupe sang provocative songs, made seditious speeches, and conducted dramatic readings and, quote, dance events with malice and enmity intentions. According to the police, the banned Maoist organization CPI have organized role to boast and implicate the strong Maoist thoughts in the depressed classes and misdirect or misguide them and turn them towards unconstitutional violent activities, end quote. It is abundantly clear that anti-terror legislation and the power to ban organizations pose a fundamental threat to both the freedom of association and the freedom of speech and expression. And I'd probably deviate from the title of the seminar to say it's not the abuse of terrorism laws that targets freedom of speech and expression and fundamental human rights of Indians. It is their use, their existence, as Ritesh said, poses a fundamental challenge to rule of law and constitutionalism in India. Thank you very much.